So first of all, thank you for all for coming, and thank you especially to our panelists today. We have three professors joining us. We have Dr. Tara Mulder, Dr. Susan Holman, and Dr. Molly Jones-Lewis, who will be joining us in just a bit. Susan has asked to do her own introduction, but for Dr. Mulder, she has a wide variety of experience in different teaching positions, including as an adjunct, a visiting assistant professor at a small liberal arts college, a teaching faculty member at an R1, and a tenure track currently research position at an R1 as well. For Dr. Jones-Lewis, good morning. She has spent a number of years as a visiting assistant professor around the US, so she knows about the itinerant life very well, and is currently holding a permanent renewable visiting lectureship at her current job. She's also an autistic and disabled professor who's been on the job market for a while and dealing with those hassles. For anyone who's interested in talking about those issues, she would be a really valuable and willing resource. With that in mind, our order of panelists will be Dr. Mulder, Dr. Jones-Lewis, and Dr. Holman. Shall we get started, Tara? Okay, you should be able to screen share.
Sure. Okay, thanks, Misa.
Mhm.
Okay, here we go. Um, Let me remember how to get going here. Are you able to see the slides?
Yes,
Okay. Are you seeing more than the slides or
I
just the
can
slide?
I can see your notes, like a little panel
Okay,
of notes and stuff.
okay. Um, Let me try doing it just this other way. Sorry,
Sure,
everyone.
no worries. Okay.
Um, you can do this for you.
Also, as a heads up again, the way we're running this is 15 minutes per panelist, 15 minutes for questions at the end.
Okay, hi everyone. So, as Misa said, my name is Tara Mulder, and I am currently in a tenure track research position at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. But I've had a rather windy route to get here, which has given me a lot of experience on the job on both sides of the job market. So, I'm going to just tell you, sort of outline what my experience is, and then my plan today is to talk about how to tailor materials for different types of jobs. I know the other panelists are going to talk about different aspects of going on the job market, but this is the thing that I have the most experience with, so that's what I thought I would cover. My slides are a bit text heavy, perhaps a little bit boring, but I really wanted to get into the nitty-gritty of how I organized uh, my experience when I'm writing my job materials. So I'll go through that, and then I'm happy to take questions at the end about anything that you have questions about. I'm also a parent, and I was a nursing parent on the job market. So, like when I was actually going and interviewing for jobs. So I'm happy to talk about that experience as well, if that's helpful to anybody. So I was an adjunct at Wheaton College in Massachusetts for my first year out of graduate school, and then I was a visiting assistant professor at Vassar College for 3 years. Those are both small liberal arts colleges. I was in a tenure track teaching position, and I got tenure in that position at the University of British Columbia. So that's an R1 institution, and I held this teaching role there. And then now I'm currently in a tenure track research position at the University of Wisconsin. And in that time, over those many years, I had seven on-campus interviews. I got four job offers at a variety of different institutions. And then I also served on five search committees. So one for a postdoc, two for visiting assistant professorships, one for a tenure track teaching position, and one for a tenure track research position. So that's my experience. That's where I'm coming from when I talk about tailoring materials for the job market. So I'm going to talk about tailoring for all these different types of positions and how I would go about or have gone about and how I would go about doing that differently. And I should say as a caveat in all of this, like you know, um, this is just based on my experience, how I've done things. I'm sure other people have been successful doing things other ways. And also, there's just a lot of like luck involved in this thing as well. The job, we all know the job market is just really bad. So I don't want to present this as like this is the way to get a job, but rather this is just the way that has worked for me, and it might be helpful to you. Okay. So when you're applying for postdocs, you are going in to do research for a discrete amount of time, perhaps a year or 2 years. So in your cover letter, which is the cover letter is the most important part of your application. That is the first thing that the search committee will read, and it will determine with how much enthusiasm they go on to read the rest of your file. So I cannot overstate how important the cover letter is. That's the thing that you should spend the most time on. And then, of course, you have all those other documents in the job application as well. But this is really your first meeting of the search. This is the first time the search committee meets you. So for a postdoc, you really want to start with and emphasize your research. Tell us what you've done and what you're planning to do, and how any potential connections with faculty at our institution or use of resources at our institution will help you with your research. You should have a teaching paragraph, and it should be solid, but more minimal. So talk about past experiences and successes, talk about your range, what you have taught, what you're able to teach. And then if the postdoc involves any teaching, it will at most be 1 or 2 courses for your year there, or 2 years there. So try to propose courses that will both fill department gaps, but also fit with the research that you're doing. Because we want to see that you're kind of integrating your teaching and your research together. You're bringing something fresh to our department that we don't usually offer for this discrete period of time. So exactly opposite of that is the visiting assistant professor application. This is a teaching heavy job. You're usually filling in for, again, a discrete period of time for faculty who are on leave. So you can even ask explicit questions about that. Like, is this job filling in for faculty who are on leave? Who are those faculty that are on leave, right? That can help you think about what gap the department is trying to fill with this position. So your cover letter should start with and emphasize your teaching. But you should also have a paragraph talking about your research and how any connections or resources at this institution would benefit that research. Because as someone who's served on search committees, we're trying to sort of fill this dual role. We want somebody who can come in and teach great classes and fill in for, ex-colleague who's on leave for the next year. But also we want to support somebody in the field who will hopefully go on to find a permanent job. So we want to see what's your research program? What can we do to help you with your research program while you're here, helping us with our teaching, and then, sort of hopefully boost you to go on and get a more permanent job in the future. So those are the two kind of temporary ones. Now we'll look at the three sort of more permanent jobs, and I went into more nitty-gritty detail here. And this is just, and these slides will be available afterwards, so you don't need to like write all this down or, take this all in totally right now. This is how I have designed my cover letters. So this is for a tenured track job at a small liberal arts college. Every cover letter should just open with your intent. I write to apply for this job as advertised on the SCS Placement Service website, or however you came to know of the job. Just talk about your training and or your work experience. I found the farther away I was from my PhD, the more I started to leave that out of my cover letter. So the first year I went on the job market, I said, I'm about to complete my PhD under the direction of so and so at this university. But now, I'm 11 years, 10 years out from my PhD now. I wouldn't even mention getting my PhD. I would just say I have work experience at these institutions. And then you want to lead with your teaching and curriculum design experience, any current projects you're working on. You always want to have an approach to teaching paragraphs. Some people call this your teaching philosophy. That's a little bit heady, right? It's really just how do I approach teaching? Here are some specific examples. When I'm applying for a small liberal arts college, that should be a long paragraph, right? Many examples of my teaching because at this type of institution, you're in an intimate relationship with the students where you are teaching them, you're mentoring them. Sometimes you're living in the same building as them. And so they want to really see this holistic picture of how you're interacting with students. And then I would shift, I always like to have a paragraph where I shift and it's a kind of hybrid, how my teaching connects to my research. And then my future teaching plans, my future connections and collaboration at the place I'm applying to, any past, current, or future DEI work. And then sometimes, if it's relevant, you can include a personal connection to the college or to the location. So this was a letter I wrote for a job at Kalamazoo College in Michigan, which is a small liberal arts college, and I am from Michigan. So I included a last little paragraph where I said, I have personal reasons for applying for this job. I would really like to be able to move back to Michigan and be close to my family. So that's appropriate if it's true. And then a brief sign off. So similarly, if you're applying for a tenure track teaching position, like at an R1 institution, very similar kind of setup. You lead with teaching. Um, you, but if you're applying for this type of job, you want to go beyond teaching and talk about your experience with curriculum development too, or your experience with community outreach. Because in this sort of position, you're going to be doing work not only teaching courses in the ancient world or whatever your discipline is, but developing curriculum for your department or for your entire university. That's the nature of this type of job. This type of job is rare. It's more common in Canada, but there are a few institutions at the US that offer, and I think maybe Molly can speak to this. I think Molly has a job that's kind of like this. Um, so she can talk about what that entails. So you can see there's almost nothing about research in here, right? Past teaching with specific examples, another paragraph about past teaching with specific examples. Um, this is the one paragraph, number 7, how my teaching connects to my research, right? But then future teaching, curriculum development ideas, connections I'm planning to make at X university, and then a little bit about service experience and plans. So those are the more teaching focused jobs. And then if you're applying for a tenure track research position, you want to do the opposite, of course. You want to lead with your research. So in this, for the successful, the letters I wrote that got me successful offers at research institutions, I opened with talking about past and future research, and then how my research connects to my teaching. And then I talked about, past teaching and curriculum development experience, approach to teaching with specific examples. Um, you can see my letter was still very teaching heavy because that was the experience that I had. But I still led with the research because that is the most important thing at a teaching or at a research institution or where you're trying to get a research job. Um, and I'm just this is the nature of this type of job application, both this one and the previous one, is that you're also going to be submitting a research statement, a teaching statement, a diversity, equity, and inclusion statement, maybe a teaching portfolio, right? So whatever is in your cover letter should be different than what's in those other statements. Um, which is why, even though for this R1 teaching or R1 research here, I had like one robust paragraph about my research because I have this whole separate research statement that I'm submitting to them. Okay, so I'm going to just talk briefly about tailoring the other types of materials. So what I would say overall, I don't really tailor the other materials. The cover letter gets heavily tailored to each institution and to the job ad. The other materials, very light tailoring, if any. So in the research statement, I might emphasize different aspects of a research job or based on the job ad or the focus of the position. So for instance, last year I applied to the University of Washington job, and they wanted somebody who did um, global classics, right? So I emphasized more of my work in global classics than I did for other jobs for the University of Wisconsin and the University of Pittsburgh, which wanted it, somebody who, or the University of Pittsburgh wanted somebody who did medicine. So I focused on that more for that job, right? But that's just little tweaks. Same with the teaching statement. I really only mess with that if the job ad asks for something specific. So sometimes they'll ask you to talk about a challenge you had while teaching and how you overcame it. And if you already have that included in your teaching statement, then you don't have to change anything. But if that's not something you have, you would want to add that in for that job. But otherwise, leave it the same. Same with the DEI statement. I don't think I just wrote one of those and I kept it the same. And then the teaching portfolio, that stays the same as well. So that should consist of sample syllabi are probably the most important aspect of the teaching portfolio. We want to see how you construct a class, what types of classes you teach. And then it's useful to include a summary of teaching reviews with select examples of originals. So not full teaching evaluations, but a cover page or two where you kind of highlight what the students say about your work, and then a few originals. You just pick the best ones, right? We don't need to see like you don't have to be fully honest about, what the students say about you. You're trying to get a job right now. So give us your best, right? So that leads me into tailoring at different rounds. Um, so for the first round, you're just trying to make the materials fit the job ad. Don't worry about who's on the committee, who's in the department. Just try to fit the job ad, right? Because they have to hire somebody that fits their job ad. That's usually an institutional requirement. And self promote, self promote, self promote. There's nothing more self promoting than my job application cover letters. Um, oh, sorry, I'm running out of time here. Okay, I
Oh,
don't have a
could we
clock.
could
Sorry.
we could we bring this back during the Q&A though? Because I think this would be really helpful.
Yes, 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 no problem. So
Okay.
I will just stop there and
Yeah.
then we can talk more during the Q&A.
Okay. Someone planted to ask a question about tailoring for Tara during Q&A.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, Molly, you're on deck.
Fabulous. All right, let me remember how Zoom works and we'll get going.
There should be a little green share button if I remember Zoom
Yes, I think I
correctly.
have found it. Huzzah, I think. Let me put it onto from the beginning. Here we are. My institution is not fancy, so despite being in R1, we do not have Zoom. We have WebEx. Oh, and Zoom is covering up the top of my slide. Well, that is inconvenient. I'm going to focus in my section about psychological and social issues that will come up as you're going through the interview process. And I'm also going to touch on the stages of interviewing, so this fits well with what Tara was just saying. Um, all of which I agree with, except I always talk about my research no matter what, in part because it's very closely connected with my teaching, so it doesn't separate out well. So, they're not going to take you out and shoot you if you do that. Okay. Fit is not just them deciding if you fit, but you deciding if you can be in this environment for as long as the job lasts. And that seems like an unrealistic thing to say when talking about the academic job market, because often you only get the one offer, and that is your chance. And this was my life for the first 7 years of my career. I was a visiting assistant professor in 7 different states at 8 institutions before getting my I was a visiting lecturer when I started at UMBC on a renewable maximum 4-year contract, which was made permanent a week before I gave birth to my son, at which point I got a normal, what they then called lecturer contract. They've since renamed it, and I've gotten a promotion. I am an associate teaching professor. I will never have tenure unless some administrative magic happens. I'm paid less than my colleagues, but I still have a job next year. And that is a very normal way to exist in the academic job market. It is fine, and I have no shame about it. And I'm also very happy. My colleagues are good to me, and they value my work, my presence. I'm safe to be myself with them, and that means the world. And I am cool with that calculus at the moment. You never know. So, at any rate, fit is important. I've been in places where the fit was not so great, and it was difficult for me, difficult for my family who followed me through these many years of traveling. And there was a cost to it. And this became more and more a part of what I was looking for when I was present at interviews, reading job ads, meeting my potential future colleagues. And I want to state outright that this is important. To that end, there's a personal you and a professional you. I'm sure y'all are familiar with legal rules about what committees can and cannot ask. Things like pregnancy status, do you have a family, what do they look like? That is an important line to maintain. There's a time for bringing these things up later. However, a good interview committee will give you signals about what the, for lack of a better word, vibe is. And that's something to watch out for and pay attention to. That said, you should be yourself, because you're going to have to be yourself for a year at minimum if you're very lucky, and many more years if you're extra, extra lucky. So be a polished version of yourself, dress nicely, don't cuss probably, and uh, bring a good version of your A or B plus game, because it's hard to be on your A game when you're frightened and there are strangers in the room. And that is okay too. A good environment will consist of committee members who understand that you are scared, mildly traumatized, and doing your best. If they aren't, notice that. This means that if advice on how to dress is not comfortable for you, it doesn't make sense with your gender presentation, don't do that. You need to be comfy. And there are a lot of options for that. I think this is something that's easing up as well as people become more conscious of the discriminatory nature of looking at people's clothing as a reason to hire them. At least in the interviews that I've been inside of, interviewing candidates, that's been our mode. Interviews are primarily an opportunity for the committee to ask you questions about yourself and your work, but it's also an opportunity to observe your potential future colleagues and get a sense of what they're like, what they're about. To that end, do come prepared with a few questions for them. The time for this will come at the end of the interview, and this is not a set of questions that you want to think up on the spot. You will freeze and it will be awkward. or maybe you're better at this than I am, but I froze and I was awkward the first couple of times. So as you're looking through a university website, the list of classes that are available, the tailored job description, come up with a few. Things that have gone over well in interviews I've been on the other side of have included questions about what's your student body like? Why do your majors major in your subject? What do you want for the future of your department, your program? What are you building towards as a department community? That goes over well and gives really telling answers from the people you're getting to know. Don't ask about resources until an offer has been made. So things like, will you give me moving money and how much will you pay me? Those don't happen until later. With that in mind, things that you should look for when you're deciding whether or not to take a job, if you have the luxury of choice here. These are things that, for me, have been sources of great misery and poor fit. And here I'm speaking in my capacity as someone with a pretty substantial chronic illness, as well as an autistic person. Sick day and grading speed policies can be daunting for me and for many people. If you're expected to return graded assignments within a week and they will come for you if you don't, that is unusual, but it has happened to me and it was difficult. Likewise, there was a place where they required me to get a substitute teacher if I was going to have a sick day. That was also challenging and led to me teaching one day while in the middle of a fairly severe migraine attack. It was not good for me, it was not good for the students, and it was indicative of larger issues at the institution, which I will not name. If they cross that personal professional boundary that we talked about in the first slide, and this doesn't mean they don't offer up information about their families or where they live or what the cost of living is like, that's great. You want them to do that. But they shouldn't be fishing for that information from you. They should be trying their utmost, and sometimes very awkwardly, which is adorable, to not ask these things. That's a green flag. If they're not careful about that, finally, and I think this in many ways is the most important thing, how do they treat each other? Do they speak positively about each other's work? Do they know about each other's work? Do they hold each other up? Are they proud of what they've done as a group? Are they excited to show you what they've built? That all speaks to a healthy dynamic that you have a higher likelihood of flourishing in. And here, speaking as a scholar in ancient medicine, we tend to be odd ducks. And you, as an ancient medicine specialist in one capacity or another, do want a department that appreciates having your niche specialty and is willing to expand their curriculum to accommodate your expertise. That said, also expect to be asked whether or not you can teach things that are a little out of your comfort zone. The job I have currently, I got in part because they asked me how I would teach a course in ancient warfare, a topic that I'd never taught, it hadn't come up. They did warn me ahead of time, for which they get a gold star. If they warn you what they're going to ask about, green flag. So I had time to come up with a thumbnail syllabus, and they liked it. And now it's one of my signature classes, and I am not angry about it. So, be prepared for adventure, but you do want to feel safe if you're going to be adventurous. If and hopefully when you have some kind of a job offer, things to ask about at this stage, and some of these are not things you're negotiating about, this is just good to know stuff. When is your first payday? That is going to determine all of your summer planning for the move, and it is going to be intensely important to whether or not you get to eat for the first month of teaching, usually. These can be within about a 2-month window. Sometimes it's in August, sometimes it's in September. Once it was October the 1st. there was a lot of egg salad in our house that time. But the sooner you know, the sooner you can do what you can in a financially chaotic world to take care of yourself, and it's important. Also, particularly if you have medical needs, insurance coverage start dates are key and something to pay attention to. If you're taking a visiting position, less commonly than in the past, but a few of my positions only gave me healthcare coverage for the 9 months of my teaching contract. So I would come to May and suddenly be uninsured. This was bad. So ask and make sure you get details. Your colleagues will probably know this information off the top of their head. If not, they'll connect you with someone in HR. And if they're weird about it, notice that. Um, if you are very fortunate, they will offer you some reimbursement for your move. I have had success in the past with asking that amount to be increased. I didn't always get a yes, but nobody ever withdrew a job offer and told me I was the worst. And that, particularly for visiting positions where the things you're negotiating for are often very tiny, but very important, the moving money is why we're not in more debt than we already are. Um, Another, what was it? Oh, yes. Ask what the situation is for conference funding travel as well. That will determine where you send your abstracts. This is the time to ask about spousal hires, moving assistance, the things that you need to support your family. Now it is appropriate to tell people you have a family. Like if you accidentally let it slip that you have a kid in the early interview phase, hopefully nobody will be mad though. So don't beat yourself up about this. Speaking about don't beat yourself up. Here is, you'll pardon me for the Star Trek reference, General Order number one. No to a hire does not mean no to your worth. A lot of some of them close friends, collaborators, people I've published with, are people I met on a job interview for a job I did not get. This is a really sadistic way to speed date your future collaborators. And that is okay. You can develop a lot of respect for someone as both a human and a scholar during this process, and that's one way to make this feel less dehumanizing. Still depressing, but not dehumanizing. And this is important to remember because a no to a hire will feel like a referendum on you as a person. That is something that if y'all have discovered a cheat code for not feeling that way, let me know, because I always take it personally and I know that I shouldn't. Having been on the other side of that process, it's just as hard. A lot of people that we loved as scholars and we really were blown away by in the interview stages and were torn about not making an offer to. There's only one offer, and that's sad. It's a bit of structural inhumanity in the culture we find ourselves. Do your best to navigate this with grace and to stay open to ongoing friendships after the process concludes. And the corollary to this, leaving academia is not failure. Taking a job in secondary education is also not failure. I know a lot of wonderful scholars who are now outside of academia and have made themselves wonderful lives that work well. I would be sad, but this is a prospect that I spent many years contemplating, and the cost of staying in academia is something that my family continues to pay. Particularly my spouse, who followed me through all of these jobs and gave up a lot of his own career prospects to do it. And I respect the hell out of that man. So, all of this is to say, that's the end of my remarks. And that's what I've got. Did I hit the time? I can't see a clock. Okay,
You've got 12 seconds left. You're perfect.
I will give you the 12 seconds back, Misa. There
Okay.
you are.
They're all yours, Susan. 12 extra seconds.
All right. Well, hello, everyone. Um, so I'm going to be very, very different. I'm going to share slides to start with, and then I'll probably unshare just to go back. So let's see. So I'm Susan Holman. I'm currently senior research professor at Valparaiso University. And then this is what you would see if you got a professional email from me at the bottom of the email. My personal website, which has my CV in it, and then the notable thing that seems to make a career in some ways is I got an award for a book I wrote. So that's just a very quick opening. But in fact, um, have had a very non-traditional background. So what I'm going to do today is give you a quick version of what my journey's been, and then the rest of the time on three questions. One is how to look at job search outside the box, accessing research material without faculty ID, and a little about tactful communication, although Molly and Tara have really covered everything. Excuse me. So I grew up in a working class family in which job was understood as utilitarian, entirely separate from who you were and what you valued for meaning in life. At the same time, I had absolutely wonderful public schools, and great teachers. I was shaped profoundly in areas like language learning, literature, critical thinking, cultural diversity, thinking globally, and so forth. And in high school, I also took typing, which is not irrelevant because at the time it was a very marketable skill, and it continues to be a marketable skill. I can type really quickly. So I knew from the beginning that my best skills were in writing and research. I also knew that I needed a lot of solitude to think, and that I wasn't sure I wanted to teach because that doesn't include, that's not about solitude. My parents pushed me into the sciences because they understood that as the best way to get marketable skills. So in college, my first college degrees, my graduate school degrees trained me to work as a clinical and public health nutritionist, which was the one thing that I was interested in, well, at least I'll try this. So, and I found I really did care about public health issues, and people's, the cultural issues of the people I was working with. But in practice, I had to talk all day. And this was totally the wrong fit. So I hated my jobs. I hated what I was doing. I sort of was at the peak. My mother was very proud of me, and I was dying inside. During this time, I got the chance to write a basic nutrition textbook, and it sold pretty well. It was not enough to give up working. So I knew that I could write marketable nonfiction in the health sciences, and I knew I could give talks if I was given adequate preparation time. But in all my spare time on the side, I was reading religious texts from late antiquity, finding sources related to health and medicine and disease in the ancient world. And I had been working in a community health center where a lot of people's food choices were based on their religious background. So I knew these connections, but I wasn't able to work with them in the job because that wasn't what my employer was willing to pay for. So again, I was being torn apart. So at a certain point in my career, after about 5 years, I said, enough already. I'm not jumping through any more hoops to follow somebody else's agenda. So I quit my clinical position. I got temp work doing medical editing because I had all the language, I knew the community, and I went back to graduate school to study religion and health issues in the ancient world. And I had no idea where this would lead because I had said, no more, I'm not jumping through hoops, no more agenda. This is simply where my heart is leading me. And I still wasn't sure I wanted to teach for all the same reasons, but I was passionate about research and writing. So I would do my art and I would keep it separate from how I paid the bills. So I stayed in healthcare writing and editing this way for the next really 20 years. And I focused all my real energies on research and writing as an independent scholar. So I had gone to graduate school, gotten an MTS in early Christian studies, and then got a PhD at Brown with Tara. And fortunately, really good doors open to publications, which don't pay, but that was what where my heart was. So I stayed connected with communities of scholars in my field. And yes, I had to pay my way to conferences, but I had benefits in the job. I had no summers off. I had no sabbatical time, but I had what I valued most. So, and that was finding and using my voice for ideas that contribute to ethical and moral values for global health as it connects with the study of religious history. I had speaking invitations. I had informal chances to mentor, which I did value and do value, and to encourage junior scholars. So the balance was never perfect, but it kept me sane and it paid the bills. And I fostered connections wherever I could. In one job, I had an admin role on a medical school appointments and promotions committee, which was also extremely helpful in understanding what goes on behind the scenes. And as an independent scholar, I was also able to be on people's external promotions committees. And then in 2019, totally serendipity, I landed a tenured full professor appointment in a small Midwestern college, Valparaiso in Indiana. That's a whole other story, but it led to 5 years when I developed courses and I taught what I most cared about. The first 2 years, this was 2019, so you can imagine the first 2 years were a major disruption that put everything else on hold. There was lots of commuting back and forth. I'm from Boston. This is my home. This is where I am, but Valparaiso is in Indiana. Um, COVID made a major difference. Lots of chances to see academia in crisis from the inside. I switched to hybrid teaching, returned to Boston, and then last year I technically retired, quote unquote, from at least from teaching, although that's the only thing I'm not doing now in terms of, every 3 days a week in the classroom. So I've now returned to my deeper need to focus on stable time for research and writing. And I'm still sorting out balance. I still don't know quite what it's going to mean for continuing to get paid for what I want to do, but we're all in an ongoing journey. And so that's journey in a nutshell. And now what I want to do is back to sharing my screen. Um, um, in terms of um, some ideas in some of the questions. So first, the question how to find work outside the box. And again, these will be available. So I'll go through them quickly, but feel free to come back to them in the recorded of this session. So first, it's all serendipity. Outside the box, look at a job with a critical eye and Molly has adjusted some of these things. Why did the last person leave? Who were the working partners? Sometimes you may salivate about a job and it really is a disaster or in the making. So really be cautious and careful. Interview the interviewers. Again, Molly's talked about that. Cold call. It's okay to informally email somebody whose work relates to what you want to do. Ask them for ideas, ask them for leads, keep a query short and pressure-free. People are willing and often very happy to give advice. Write your target job description. I actually got 2 jobs because I wrote a cover letter out of the blue to strangers whose organizations I liked and trusted with a description of what I wanted to do, which didn't exist. And asked if it would add value to their organization. The worst that this is that the person who gets it will ignore you, think you're someone they will never hire, say no to you. But then you've learned. Make it easy to find your CV online, streamlined and simple. Informational interviews. There was one time where my contract ended in a position and the HR person, because it was all science research funding, the HR person has said, well, have set up some informational interviews, talk to everyone else in this organization whose department interests you. And so I would I had about 5 informational interviews, which is a thing, where you can learn a lot about what goes on in a particular little niche that you might know nothing about. And finally, humor. Job search humor is usually Black. It won't get you hired, but it can keep you sane, keep you fun to be around. And there's lots and lots of crazy things to laugh at. So the next question, how to do research without academic identification, particularly if it requires faculty identification. The options will vary depending on what country you're in, what university you're in. So these are just many ideas, and not all of these will be helpful. Alumni privileges at your university may allow you to get resources that are very rare. You might have to drive down to be physically at the place and go into the library, but that is a source. Local public libraries, check out what their online access is. Bring a thumb drive wherever you go so you can download the PDF. Academia EDU has a lot of resources. You can often do searches. Many scholars post their pre-publication final drafts. It can be extremely useful. Blue Sky and equivalents I use because I find helpful connections with scholars who list publications, so you know what's new. Sometimes you have the links. You may not be able to get it, but you can write and ask for it. Some academic journals, for example, in medicine, give you this in very fine print, a free option to access the journal with limited access if you pre-register. A Google search for full title can sometimes lead to really obscure, strange, but very useful sources. Local community colleges might have library options. You can query a scholar for off-prints. This last year, a scholar emailed me. It was really out of the blue. I knew her, but she emailed me because she needed a 1935 French translation of a small text that I happened to mention in my dissertation, which she had access to. And she couldn't find it anywhere. She was in a very good university. Did I by any chance still have it? So I was able to just turn around, find it on my shelf and scan the relevant page, which was really strange and wonderful for both of us. If you can and have the resources to do so, you can often think about volunteering as a part-time research associate for faculty who might be willing to sponsor a research library card for you at their institution. Books and rare materials in other languages are harder. Sometimes you can ask to be a book reviewer for new publications if you really want the book. Often you can find dissertations online. And I can't see what my last line is, but whatever it is, there's generosity. So the other question on manners and self-promotion, and again, Tara and Molly have said much of this. So less is more. When you're addressing people, be formal, dear doctor, dear professor. I mean, it's better to be more formal than less formal. Always spell names correctly. If something is misspelled, I just write it off immediately as unprofessional. So, I mean, it just completely is, that's the end. So, and I also occasionally make typos, so it goes both ways. So always proofread your emails, and I proofread everything out loud at least twice before, if it's really important, before you send it. And if you make changes while you're doing that, proof it again out loud. Always say thank you as much as is reasonably possible. You can say thank you to people for their time, for any insights. You can also thank someone who has, in fact, demonstrated a behavior that you find appalling. All you have to do is say thank you, and they may not need to know why you're thanking them, but you've learned and you respect them as a human being. If the replies are not helpful or negative, just move on. Showcase your professional self online, keep it streamlined, link to your talks, include that in your signature as I showed you with mine. I also gave a talk many years ago on how to write an academic journal article that I realize has some very basic tips that could be useful also for scholarly presentation. And then finally, stay focused on your priorities because you only need one job at a time. So in terms of the big picture, My takeaways would be know and affirm your deepest positive sense of self. Know what gives you life and energy and hold on to it. Let go of whatever does not. Embrace the highest standards. These are things that could go without saying, but they need saying too. Whether it's in your teaching, your writing, your research, do not beat on yourself. And never be tricked into thinking that your worth is the same as workplace politics. And then finally, when the going gets really tough, I find these tips. This is on my refrigerator from one of my former mentors and employers, a slide that she gave in a talk on the components of resilience, which I find incredibly helpful. And I've given you the source. The resilience is resilience is characterized by a sense of self, self-worth, biography, life story, trajectory, humor, be willing to fail and risk to get back up, trust others wisely, a willingness to forgive yourself as well as others, and a conviction that that life has meaning. So I will stop there and open it up for whatever comes next.
Okay, that was perfect, round the dot. So we have about 8 minutes left until 9 a.m. on the West Coast time or 2 a.m. in Australia. If people have to log off after that, that's very understandable. This will stay recorded. Otherwise, if people are willing to stay on for the full 15 minutes of Q&A, that including our panelists, then we can go until 9:10, until 10 after the hour. That works for people? Okay, so I think we have one hanging question for Tara's point about tailoring, and then we just throw it open for any questions that are left unanswered, any questions that came up. All yours, just raise a hand. Okay, Tara, how do we tailor? Okay.
Thank you. Yes, sorry, I'm getting back to. So I had at the end of my slideshow, there were a few questions that came up in um, the questions that came in before this webinar. And I just wanted to address a couple of those. So one of this is how do you know who's on the search committee? Um, and I will say this did come up for me once. I was applying for a job and I knew that somebody at the institution really did not like me. I had had several interactions with this person and it was clear that for whatever reason, they didn't like me and I felt like they had a vindictive streak so that if I applied for the job and they were on the search committee, I would not make it like to the first round interview. So I discreetly reached out to somebody else in that department who was just somebody I knew of but didn't really know. And I just said, I don't know if you're able to give me this information, but I'm wondering who's on the search committee. And that person just told me. And because that one scholar wasn't on the search committee, I put in an application. Um, that was, maybe playing with fire a little bit because obviously if I had made it all the way through and gotten a job offer, I would have had to consider like, do I want to work with somebody who doesn't seem to like me? For my purposes, I was kind of interested in this job for in terms of like having negotiating power. So, which is all just to say, it's okay to ask, and they can just tell you no, right? And sometimes it might feel safer to ask like a more junior person who you feel like is closer to where you are. That's totally, you can just cold email someone in the department and be like, I know your department's running this search. Are you able to give me any more information? And if they don't feel comfortable, they can just say no, and that's not gonna, it's gonna be okay. Um, at the second round of interviews, if you make it to the first round, so I think of like the application is okay, you apply, you tailor to the job ad. If you make it to the first round of interview, they should tell you who's going to be interviewing you. If they don't, you can email the contact email on the job ad and ask. Many jobs now tell you questions that they're going to ask you in the first round interview. If they do, prepare, prepare, prepare. Practice out loud, practice ad nauseum. Have like worked out, but also casual sounding answers to every single one of those questions. You literally, like, you can't practice enough, right? If this is what you really want, you got to give it your all. Um, If they don't give you the questions, write your own questions and act like they've given you the questions, right? You can talk to people in your department or people you know from graduate school or just any scholars that you happen to know. Hey, have you been in a first round interview? What kinds of questions did they ask? And make your own set of sample questions and practice those ad nauseum because you will get some variety of those questions. And then if you get to the campus interview stage, I'm a big fan of familiarizing myself with every single person in the department and reading something that every single person in the department has written. Because then when you have your one-on-one interview with them, which you will, it might not feel like an interview, it might just feel like you're going out for coffee in between your talk and hanging out with the grad students, right? But that's an interview. And you will have something to talk about with them. You know their research and you will be able to talk about it with them. So it's a lot of work, it takes a lot of time, but it shows that you're really serious about being a colleague, you're serious about being their future colleague. Um, so I would say that one of the questions is, how do you distinguish yourself in a first round interview? Just show that you've thought through answers to the questions that we're asking. It seems simple, but a lot of people show up to first round interviews and they just don't really have much to say, honestly. Like it happens more than you would think. So I would say just be prepared and you will stand out. Um, Somebody said, "Am I too old?" I hope that this has shown that probably not. Molly, Susan, and myself have all had these really long routes to getting to where we want to be. Um, and maybe this is scaring you off from academia, which is totally fine if it is. I know Molly and I have moved all over North America for the sake of this profession. And that's really, really hard. And that might not be the kind of life that you want to have or the quality of life that you want to have. But you're not too old. I've been on search committees where we've interviewed people for assistant professor jobs that are in their 50s. And we take those people just as seriously as someone who's in their 20s or their 30s, right? It's the quality of your research and who you are as a person. Um, that's it.
Thanks so much, Tara. For our audience members, does anyone have a question they want to share first? Okay, I have a question then to get started. Oh, sorry, Glenn, you go ahead. Okay, sure. I have a question then for cover letters because there are a lot of paragraphs listed in your cover letters. I've been told a cover letter should only be a page at most. Does that advice hold?
Two pages, 11-point font,
Good to know.
single spaced.
I am cursing the past year of
Tiny
cover
margins.
letters. Yes.
There's a lot you need to get into that cover letter, and
Yeah.
that's acceptable.
An extra
11-point font, single spaced, 2 pages.
One
Just
is
make sure your
weird.
signature can fit at the bottom.
Okay. Glenn, I saw you unmute for a moment. Okay. Sorry, do you have a question? Okay. Hey, John Paul.
Hey guys, good to see you all. I have a question, actually. When
Mhm.
it comes to, especially for PhD students who are wrapping up and just started on dissertation, how do you make up a second project that you're going to work on?
I'll go with this one because I've had many hypothetical second projects I've pitched in my time. Um, Nobody is going to sit you down and make you write the second project, but pick something that you genuinely know about and want to do, and make a good 2 to 3 sentence case for why it's exciting and people should care. Um, I've found success when it flows naturally from project number one. And I have a plan for how I'm going to finish it, maybe what press it's going to go to. What they want to see is that you know how projects work and you have a plan for executing it that is realistic and recognizable.
Thank you, Molly.
Julia, please.
I think this is a bizarre question, but I've never been accused of not having enough ideas. And of the things that I'm worried about a little bit as I start to think about job materials is, I don't know, coming across a little hubristic in my research intentions. And I don't know what people expect in terms of like, I have this thought and that thought about sort of research directions. I don't know where the line between like I come off as not having anything to work on and you're trying too hard is. So anybody has thoughts on that, I'd be really interested to hear.
I would just say focus with all your many ideas, focus on defining questions, and say, I'm interested in asking this question about, and the questions, and then admitting that you don't know if this is a multiple project game or if it's going to eventually come together in a single book project. It showcases your creative mind while also recognizing that you're thinking about whatever will come.
I would say one way to think about this is the rate, kind of the ratio between what have you done, what are you currently doing, and what do you plan to do? So if you're currently doing 5 things, right? Like you're running a workshop, you're on a panel, you're giving a talk, you've sent an article for review, right? You're a busy scholar already. If you want to then tell me you have a plan for 4 things for the future, I'll believe you because you're currently doing 4 things. But if you're currently doing one thing, if you're currently just working on your dissertation and you're like, in the future, I want to write these 3 articles and these 2 talks and publish this second book, I'm like, you're your eye your eyes are bigger than whatever, I don't know the metaphor, but you have aspirations, but we don't see that actually happening in real time. So I would just try to keep kind of those aspects balanced. We just want to get a sense. We don't want to feel like you're somebody who has like just all these ideas but nothing concrete is actually coming of them.
I'd like to add to that a note that your mileage may vary, but particularly if you're a neurodivergent scholar, be aware that your process may look weird to a committee. So perhaps run this by a couple of neurotypical friends. I'm remembering one interview where I crashed and burned because I was honest about my process, which is I have several genres project, depending on how much time and bandwidth I have on a day. I have still, this is true of me. There's a classroom commentary, a translation, and my proper scholarship, eternally slowly moving book project. And that is how I managed to maintain productivity while teaching every single semester, including winter and summer. So apparently that was the wrong answer of that committee, and they were a little freaked out by it. What I should have done is focus on the more booky of the projects and relate it to what I was writing at the time. But you live, you learn.
Thank you.
We have about 5 minutes left, 4 minutes left on the clock. If anyone has further questions from the audience, but we're also over time. I want to respect people's time about that. So, any last lingering audience questions? Yeah, please, Laura.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for the talk today. It's been really useful. I just have a quick question. So I finished my PhD. I was actually advised during my PhD to not focus on publication and to just focus on my research and my thesis. And then the final year of my PhD, I ended up my funding ran out, so I had to get full-time jobs. So my last year was focused on the thesis. So I kind of find myself now with no journal publications, but also wanting to get into the academic job market and don't really know where to prioritize. And I just wondered, so I kind of skipped. So like 1 week I'll work on an article that I have kind of almost ready to go, and the next week I'll think, no, I need to work on a postdoc proposal. And so I just wondered if you could kind of give some advice about where the focus should be in terms of getting yourself in an employable position.
I would just say, I think a lot of people I was given that same advice during my PhD. Don't publish anything while you're a grad student.
Yeah.
So my first article didn't come out until I was 2 years out of grad school. Um, I think what happens is there's this moment right when you finish maybe you're still finishing your PhD, or right when you finish your PhD, where there's an extremely slim chance that you land a tenure track job, and it doesn't matter that you don't have any publications because you're just brimming with potential, right? And it's all going to happen once you're at, X R1 institute. That doesn't happen for most of us. So then we have these sort of more circuitous routes where we might get a postdoc, a VAP, or adjunct position or a lecturer position, which means something different in every country. Lecture is something different in the US, in Canada, and in the UK, of course. But so I would say, apply to every job that fits, right? Because there's still a chance you could get a tenure track job and they're just like, she's brimming with, I'm not sure when you finished your PhD, but she's brimming with potential. She'll publish. It's probably more realistic that you would land one of those temporary jobs. And then once you're in that job, I would focus on trying to get a publication out. And then the most important thing for the United States job market, the most important thing is to work on your book. So even if you're not publishing articles at the rate that you would if you were in a tenured R1 research position, if you're at these other types of positions and you eventually want to get into an R1 position, no matter how many years it's been from your PhD, if you've been working on a book, or you have a book contract, or you have a book coming out, that's what they see. That's the hardest thing to do to get tenure in that type of position. So you should get an article or two, but then focus on the book. That's what search committees want to see. They want to see that even if you've been, teaching 6 or 8 classes a year at a VAP, you've still been chugging away at a book, and it's hard. And like we heard that from Susan, right? It often involves the work you do during the day to pay the bills, and then the work you do on your own time to get where you want to be, or to be doing the kind of work that like feeds your soul. And that's kind of the reality of academia these days.
Okay, thank you.
We are at 9:10, unfortunately, but we will have written notes circulating for anything that was left unsaid and wanted to be said, or just like another form of giving out this material. There'll also be a recording posted to ReMeDHe website. We'll send an email out about that. And thank you all for coming. That's my timer. Okay. Thank you all for coming so much. And good luck, Laura.
Are you able
Thank you. Yeah. Just trying to work out how to turn my screen off.
Oh,
Sorry.
you're fine.
No worries, you're fine,
On
you're
a
fine.
personal note, we did a search last year, and a lot of people's profile look like yours. Many of whom made it to our interviews. So nil desperandum, Laura.
I think it's really difficult, isn't it? Because you see everyone else, and everyone else is like, "Oh, I've got this publication, and I remember the conversation I had with my supervisors, and they were like, "No, don't worry about it. It will be fine." And I said, I do want an academic career, and now I'm like, "Oh."
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
it's just what I focus on, and I go round in circles. So 1 week I'll work on something, because I'm working full time still. So, then you kind of 1 week I think, oh, I need to book proposal, and then next week I think, oh, I've got to do a journal article, and the next week and so nothing's actually getting done, if I'm being honest, because I'm getting myself into a bit of a mess about it, really. So thanks
Highly
for the
relatable.
advice.
yeah,
Pick something.
Yes, and just get it done.
Yeah, like anything is good.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
my order of hierarchy of needs is you have to have the job. Okay, because that's what pays the bills. For
Yeah.
those of us who are not independently wealthy, right? You have to be making the money so that you can live and eat. So you have to do the work that gets you the job, whether that's applying for a postdoc or doing the job applications for a tenure track job, or applying for a grant, right? That's the top one. And then the next one is getting a publication out.
Yeah. Okay.
And then like a peer-reviewed publication in a journal.
Mm-hmm.
And then the book, right? Which it's hard to prioritize because it's such a long process.
Yeah.
And you're not going to see the gains of that for a really long time.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what will keep you competitive in academia.
Okay. Lovely. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
yeah. Thanks for coming.
It's hard.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye.